Every February, it's the same thing, right? We're just surrounded by hearts and roses and tons of candy. But have you ever stopped to wonder what the real story is behind Valentine's Day? Because let me tell you, it's a tale that is way stranger and honestly, much more dramatic than you could ever imagine. So let's dig in and uncover the real history. We all think we know this holiday. It's about love, romance, maybe a little too much chocolate. But what if I told you its origins have almost nothing to do with any of that? The real story is a lot darker and, well, a whole lot weirder. I mean, just look at this. The difference between what we think of the holiday and where it actually started is pretty shocking. We're thinking Cupid and candy, but the story really kicks off in ancient Rome with naked priests and goat hides. Yeah, you heard that right. It was anything but romantic.
To really understand Valentine's Day, we have to go way back in time, long before saints or greeting cards even existed. Our story begins with a wild Roman festival, all about fertility, purification, and some truly bizarre rituals.
It was called Lupercalia, and this thing, held in the middle of February, was a raw, primal festival. The whole point was to ward off evil spirits and, most importantly, to boost fertility for both the people and the land. So think less dinner in a movie and more chaotic and completely untamed. Some scholars even trace it back to the Greek god Pan, the god of the wild.
And the rituals themselves, they were just wild. The festival would start with animal sacrifices. Then, priests would run through the streets completely naked, whipping women with strips of bloody goat hide. Now, it sounds brutal, but women would actually line up for this because they believed it would make them more fertile. And to top it all off, there was a matchmaking lottery that paired up young men and women for the whole festival. A far, far cry from a romantic date. So how in the world did we get from that chaotic scene to the holiday we know today? Well, as Christianity spread, the church wanted to get rid of these pagan traditions. So, at the end of the 5th century, Pope Gelasius I banned Lupercalia, and in its place he established a feast day on February 14th to honor a martyred saint named, you guessed it, Valentine. But this just adds another layer of mystery to the whole thing, because the question of who Saint Valentine actually was is surprisingly complicated. Yeah, the historical records here are super murky. There are at least 2 well-known martyrs named Valentine connected to February 14th. One was a priest in Rome, the other was a bishop in Tournai. And since they were both martyred around the same time, a lot of historians now suspect that their stories just kind of merged over time, and they might actually be the same person. But it's the legends that grew up around him that really started to shape the holiday. One of the most popular stories claims Emperor Claudius II had outlawed marriage for young men because he thought single men made better soldiers. Well, Valentine supposedly defied this rule and secretly married young lovers. Another story says he was martyred for helping Christians escape from harsh Roman prisons. But the most romantic legend of them all, the one that directly connects to our modern traditions, involves one last act of kindness. While he was in prison waiting to be executed, Valentine is said to have befriended his jailer's daughter. And get this, he apparently healed her from blindness. And this is where we get the origin of a phrase we still use every single year. Before his execution, he supposedly wrote the girl a final note, and he signed it with those 3 famous words, "From your Valentine."
For centuries, St. Valentine's Day was really just a religious feast day. It wasn't until the Middle Ages that it began to turn into a celebration of love, all thanks to the influence of poets and the whole culture of courtly romance. The romantic connection really started to solidify over time. The first big link we have comes from the English poet Geoffrey Chaucer, who wrote that birds chose their mates on St. Valentine's Day. This whole idea of courtly love just took off. By the year 1400, the French court was holding these elaborate Valentine's festivities. And then, in 1415, we get the very first surviving Valentine, a poem written by Charles, Duke of Orleans, to his wife while he was imprisoned in the Tower of London. So, from these noble beginnings, the tradition of exchanging love notes started to trickle down to everybody else, long before the age of mass-produced cards. In the 17th and 18th centuries, people would craft these beautiful personal cards by hand. A really popular style was called the puzzle purse, where a piece of paper was folded in all these intricate ways to reveal hidden verses and messages as you opened it. A true labor of love. And what if you weren't a poet like the Duke of Orleans? No problem. Publishers saw an opportunity here, and they started printing these little booklets filled with romantic verses. You could just pick one you liked, copy it onto your card, and send it off to your beloved. It was pretty much the 18th century version of a copy and paste text message.
So, the tradition of sending cards was firmly in place, but it was a brilliant American entrepreneur in the 19th century who really transformed Valentine's Day into the commercial powerhouse we all recognize today. Her name was Esther Howland. After getting an English Valentine, she was convinced she could make them better, and, more importantly, that she could sell them in America. Working out of her family's stationery store in Massachusetts, she started a business that would change the holiday forever. And her idea was a wild success. At its peak, Howland's company was making over $100,000 a year, which is the equivalent of millions of dollars today. Esther Howland had basically created the American greeting card industry right from her workshop.
So, what was her secret? Innovation. She imported the absolute finest materials from Europe, lace, ribbons, and all this colorful paper. She created these elaborate, multi-layered designs that were totally unlike anything anyone had seen in America. And years before Henry Ford became famous for it, she set up an all-female assembly line to produce these intricate cards on a massive scale.
So, the next time you see a Valentine's Day card, remember all the layers of history it contains. In that single piece of paper, you'll find the echoes of a wild Roman festival, the legacy of a mysterious saint, the flourish of medieval poets, and the sharp business sense of a pioneering female entrepreneur. It's a holiday that's been shaped and reshaped over 2,000 years. The only question is, which part of its story will you be celebrating?